Hey there, my name is Andrew Bristansky and I'm a professional photographer based in Montreal, and today we're going to be talking about manual focusing lenses with the Leica SL2. So before we begin, I'd like to thank my friends over at the Leica Boutique Camtech Photo here in Montreal for lending me their beautiful Leica SL2 right here. I've had it in my possession for the last week, and as soon as I got it, I immediately started shooting with it, and I have to say, very second nature, very organic camera experience. I'm very happy to say that it's been a blast. When we were talking about which next project to do, I was really eager to experience the Leica SL firsthand, especially with my approach to photography, which is pretty much strictly just manual focus lenses. I sold all my autofocus lenses when I moved over to the M10 in 2017, but I really wanted to see how the SL behaved with just manual lenses, especially with my M lenses. So for the last week, I've taken hundreds of photos on this camera and got to really experience how it is in a day-to-day environment, and I'm very happy to report that it's very easy. There was really no learning curve involved. You just play as you go, you adjust things as you go, and at the end of the day, the camera really just does become an extension of yourself. And there wasn't really any moments where I felt like I was missing out on any buttons or any features. It really just felt like a nice hybrid between a Sony camera and a Leica M. I would say the files are very, very similar to my M10s. Obviously, this one has 47 megapixels, so it really does feel like a nice marriage between the M10 and my Sony A7R2 right here. I don't want to compare the SL too much to the Sony because this is an A7R2 and Sony releases a camera every second year, so I'm having a hard time keeping up with their latest models, but I have two A7R2s. I'm very used to them, so jumping into the SL2, it did feel kind of reminiscent of my early days when I got the A7R2 in 2015. Manual focusing lenses on the SL is actually just one step above what I've experienced in other mirrorless cameras, let alone the Sonys and the M10. The lenses behave fantastically on the SL2. I really was impressed, and I'm very, very relieved because I was a little nervous because one thing I really value about my M10 is just that gorgeous sensor. It's very crisp, the colors are very vivid, and the lenses, which are very unforgiving on other sensors, are very at home on the M10, and then that carries into the SL2. Very happy to say that because with 47 megapixels, I was sure I was going to encounter, some corner smearing, maybe increased vignetting. No, none of that. Without any color profiles applied to the lenses, I noticed it right out of the box. The SL2 vignettes less than the M10 that I have right here does. I'm talking about, let's say, the 35 distagon on the M10, wide open. Obviously, it's going to vignette a lot. It vignettes as well on the SL2, but to a lesser degree. In fact, it makes the files feel just a little bit bigger. Other than the fact that it's obviously a lot more megapixels, but what I mean by that is even when you're focusing and framing on the SL2, the files just have so much more, the image just has a lot of breathing room. I mean, yes, you're looking through the lens, which is a nice change from shooting with the M's, but I did notice that just looking at the screen right after I took a shot, the pictures felt a little less claustrophobic than they felt with the M10 files that I have. As for colors go, I applied the native color profile for the camera, so the embedded color profile in Lightroom on the files for the SL2. Which, if you're not doing that with your current camera setup, give it a try. I much prefer the native color profiles to, let's say, Adobe Color or any of the Adobe presets that come loaded with, when you plug them into your RAW. The M10 and the SL2 have extremely similar colors. I might think that the M10 files are just a little bit more saturated because when it came to low light shooting, the SL2 did feel a lot more realistic. The M10 files are a little bit more yellow and warm, and they kind of get cartoonish at low lights, you know, where I have to really work around the files, especially indoors. There's just, you know, like browns, yellows, browns, and oranges just turn into this kind of chalky yellow at low light with the M10, whereas with the SL2, much more manageable, much more realistic, still a little bit more yellow, but I find that adds to the look that you get from the files. And the dynamic range, the outright image performance of the SL2 is fantastic. I really walked into this system without doing a lot of research prior to playing with the camera, because I just wanted to see if I could just pick up this camera and go out with it. And so that's exactly what I did. I didn't want to over-investigate, over-analyze everything with the SL2 prior to having it, because I find that when you over-research a camera, you kind of get overwhelmed when you pick it up for the first time, and 9 times out of 10, your expectations are usually wrong. And I'm very happy to say that it carried out into the experience. So as a Leica M shooter, I always have an M on me, and I really wanted to see if I could, you know, carry that over into a different camera body, because the Sonys that I have are pretty much just workhorses. They don't inspire me as much as the M's do, and I also find that the files coming out of the Sonys are require just a little bit too much post-production work, and unfortunately they also do not behave well with my Leica M lenses. And so that's where the SL2 really comes into play. The SL2, you have that incredible image quality. I mean, 47 megapixels, and it behaves so nicely with my M lenses. There's no smearing in the corners, there's no added vignetting, like I said, and the colors are fantastic. I could have both of these together and shoot an entire wedding with them, and the album would be so cohesive because of just how similar the files are. Whereas I find working with the Sonys and my M10 as my main camera, I usually have to do a little bit more post-production work to match the colors up a little bit more, so that, you know, one file doesn't look too different from the other. As far as a handling standpoint and maybe a user experience standpoint, I would definitely put the SL2 between the using the Sony and using the M10. So what I mean by that is, it's obviously you don't have to account for the rangefinder and, you know, the parallax and not really looking through the lens, and also it just feels a little bit more engaging than the Sony does. There weren't any instances where I did feel like I was missing out on any buttons or features on the SL2, because the SL2 actually has a ton of customizable buttons. I mean, more than I would even need. I wound up even overlapping a few buttons, because for me, for manual focusing, all I really need is focus peaking, magnification, shutter speed if I'm doing aperture priority, and ISO. And other than that, the thumb stick in the back, the touchscreen, both aided in that manual focusing ease that I really got to appreciate with the SL2. Obviously with the M10, it's a little more back to basics. Obviously, you focus with the patch and recompose. Very used to doing that approach. With the SL2, you really just get to look through the lens. There's no surprise when you look at your files at the end of the day, especially with this incredible viewfinder and the incredible screen. I was shooting it out into the blazing sunlight and nothing. I mean, the screen is so contrasty, so vivid, so bright. Same thing for the viewfinder, and even using an SL alongside the SL2 for a brief moment, I got to see and appreciate the improvements, especially when it came to the viewfinder. The viewfinder is very contrasty, very vivid, very lifelike. This or an optical viewfinder at this point in time are pretty much equal. I mean, and this is even better than most optical viewfinders I've looked through anyway. It's humongous. I was able to frame and compose and focus without even ever having to use focus peaking for most of my shots. So it actually made focusing a breeze and a very fast thing to do with my manual lenses. As a tool, I appreciate it, and I would definitely have it alongside my M10 for a full wedding day. The one feature I do feel like the SL2 is missing is an articulating screen. There are a few instances where I'm used to focusing from the hip with the Sonys, where I would flip the screen out, focus from the hip. It's a nice welcome addition because it's a little bit more inconspicuous, because with the M10, zone focusing obviously is easy, but it becomes much more of a haptic, visceral connection with the camera, whereas with the SL2, not having the ISO readily available, which I've come to appreciate with the SL2, shutter speed, also just being a visible dial definitely helps in use. The SL2 I find is more appropriate as a aperture priority camera for manual focusing, and I do wish it had a dedicated ISO button, but I mean the shortcut's there, but it's not as immediate. You still have to open up the screen. You're pretty much better off leaving it on an auto ISO. I limited the ISO to 6400 because I'm just very used to doing that with my M10. And as far as low light performance goes, I don't really have any gripes with the SL2. I did notice that though the highlight retention is very similar to that of my M10. What I mean by that is you can clip your highlights and they don't really retain as much, but I'm very used to shooting underexposed, so it wasn't really something that I walked into a lot. But coming from a back illuminated sensor on the Sony A7R2s, I did come to, I was used to it prior to starting with Leica, just shooting anything and then recovering the files in post. So if you have an SL2 or even an M for that matter, just shoot underexposed, because you'll never notice any highlight loss if that's the case, because you're just going to be boosting your exposure anyway, so you're going to have the highlight detail there. So it's a tip to take away from this video. If you don't do that already, definitely do that. With little ones like this, it makes me realize that maybe I don't need to jump into autofocus to get the shot sometimes. It was a nice experience to frame and look through my lens and get an idea for the shot immediately. If you're in the market for a new camera, or you're a veteran M shooter looking for a new experience, this really is the easiest way to shoot M glass without any compromises at all. The image performance is mind-boggling. It's gorgeous, it's crisp, the colors are real and very nice. And looking through the lens has been a very welcome experience, especially seeing how I don't have any of the normal compromises that I have with mounting it to any other mirrorless system. It's really just a great addition to any M mount user's workflow or arsenal, and I really recommend this camera. I really can't stress it enough just how good it is. So honestly, I'd like to thank Jean and the guys at Camtech for really helping put this together and supplying the camera for this, and I really appreciate it. And please don't forget to like and subscribe and check out for more stuff soon.